the shadows they wander alone, old ruins where fears have grown, eyes that watch from ancient stone, whispers chill right to the bone. Gothic castles rise in the night, ghostly figures glide out of sight, wolf howling under pale moonlight, darkness creeps and grabs too tight. You have fallen into the Euro crypt. There is no escape from the Euro crypt. Fog curling through cobblestone streets, footsteps echoing heartbeats, vampires hunt their nightly feast, lurking monsters are released. Silent scream in a sepia dream, melancholy miles downstream, no one's safe or so it seems. Worlds unravel at the seams. You have fallen into the Euro crypt. There is no escape from the Euro crypt. Fallen into the Euro crypt. There is no escape from the Euro crypt.
We're thrilled to welcome three of the most knowledgeable minds in the world of cult cinema. These are the people who spent years unearthing lost gems, shining a light on the obscure and forgotten, and reminding audiences that there's a world of film far beyond Hollywood's spotlight. True masters of the craft of film criticism. Welcome to the Eurocrypt.
Hey, right. What is happening? What's going down?
Hello.
Yeah, man. Today, man, we are super hyped to have y'all on, man.
I want to start with a question.
Yeah.
Who of you sung the opening song?
Oh God, you don't want to hear my voice.
Oh, neither one of us. But no, man. Yeah, this is an honor to have y'all, man. This is Troy's been on a few times. This is the first time having Nathaniel on, so it's great to get you on finally. Ercolani's been on once before, and but yeah, man, we got a lot to get through.
Oh yes, yeah, we got one hell of a list in front of me. Again, just echoing what Dirk said, it's just brilliant to get you guys, especially all together as well. It's just like Dirk said, just an honor to speak to you because, you know, at the end of the day, we're massive fans, as you know, and we're always listening to your commentary tracks, your extras, your interviews. So yeah, this is always, always a good time.
Yeah, man.
It does feel like we're about to start an audio commentary, doesn't it?
Yeah, we got a question about that to come as well, like some behind the scenes, how you get into these things and all that. But the first question I want to mention is, so we usually do this at the end on some streams, I've noticed, but we want to get it, do it early. Have you got, like, what's some of the stuff that you've recently done that you'd like to promote and mention, straight off the bat? And we can go.
There's one 24 hours ago that we just did.
Troy, and then Nathaniel. Yeah, if you want to go in order like that, when we got a question for all three, that's good. So I say,
who starts?
Eugenio start, then we'll go Troy. And
okay. Something I've done. that I'd like to promote in terms of audio commentaries or in general? Because in general, the first thing that comes to mind is the Cannibal book.
Yeah.
That's been doing the rounds at the moment in various internet arenas and all that, and so yeah, that would be the one. There you go. Yeah, unfortunately, the book jacket is an exclusive of the pre-order stage. Now, if you buy the book, you'll just you'll get the yellow pop one, which people seem to like. So I'm happy about that. Yeah. So do I do the promotion now?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Well, okay. So yeah, I don't have an entry song for it or anything, no graphic design, but it's yeah, no, it's a book that was put together relatively quickly, but I'm very happy with it. As some people know already, it tackles the Italian cannibal subgenre, all the major films, plus some tangential stuff like the Jesus Franco diptych and the Eli Roth homage to Cannibal Holocaust mainly, although it feels more like a Massacre in Dinosaur Valley. And then and of course the Bruno Mattei direct-to-video films from the early 2000s. So kind of the whole thing, and some anomalies like Anthropophagus and Cut and Run and Zombie Holocaust, and it's packed with interviews. It's a big boy. It's a big book, packed with interviews from Ruggero Deodato to Umberto Lenzi, Sergio Martino, but also sort of some people that haven't talked about their contribution to the genre, like writer Gianfranco Clerici, who's sort of an enormous, gigantic figure when it comes to cannibal movies, having written really the two films that, the film that mapped out the rules, and then the most important film within the genre. I'm referring to Last Cannibal World, or Jungle Holocaust and Cannibal Holocaust, and also Roberto Donati, Claudio Morales, also the DOPs like Sergio Uffizi, Gelling. I mean, it's packed with interviews, documents. We pulled out all the files from the National Film Archive and Film Registry. You can find the letters written by the defense lawyer, Deodato's defense lawyer, plus during obviously the Cannibal Holocaust trial. That's what I'm referring to. And there are some great people who contributed to the book, among whom Mr. Troy Howarth, who wrote two lovely essays for the book.
Awesome. And I was wondering though, because it's sold out on Amazon. You can't find it on Amazon. And then I went to Amazon UK, it's sold out. And I went to Amazon Italy, and it said it was gonna be like 7 months before it got here. I was like, what's going on? So how can I find it if I wanted to? Is there?
Well, I can ready say this, although it'll be official on the 1st of April. But I know Pulse, my publisher, has already divulged the news. So it will be available through Vinegar Syndrome from the 1st of April. So anybody in North America can buy it through Vinegar. If not, when it comes to Europe, well, in the UK, Strange Vice, Film Treasures are selling it. I think another e-commerce online shop is selling it as well. I'm not too sure, but definitely those two. And for the rest of Europe, there's directly Pulse Books that is selling it on their site. So yeah, there are options, but it is selling really well. And for the most part, I would say nearly the totality of the feedback has been positive. So yeah, and I feel the one of the sort of winning aspects of the book is the fact that it doesn't. It's very matter of fact. There are chapters that are more academic, others that are considerably less purple, but it's ultimately it points out facts. It deals with the actual intents of the filmmakers and with the industry and what the market dictated. So it's dealing with a lot of that, and also sort of shed some light on legends that have been passed on generation to generation, tied to the famous cannibal Holocaust trials, but also to how some of these films got made and why. So yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with it. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, I think you've sold pretty much just the way you talked about it. Then you've made a lot of sales. It sounds like it's going to be the definitive kind of guide to cannibal films. Yeah.
It's not up to me to say, but I mean the Guillaume, my publisher, wanted to write that on the cover, but the definitive guide, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I was not in favor of that because there's always something more you can add. The book has been available for, I think, just over a month, and I would now put some things in that I chose, or I chose not to put in, or interviews I didn't have at the time. So so there's always wiggle room to better and add. So I never like using the word definitive, but it definitely is the most exhaustive publication on the topic for the time being.
So definitely a strong reference book for sure, huh? I would say.
Hopefully.
My personal favorite cannibal film is Man from Deep River. So
yeah, well, Man from Deep River Savages is an important one. I wouldn't say it's the purest example, but right. It's definitely it started it all in a way. I mean, it's the DNA of cannibal movies is made out of different ingredients, different film strains, but it's a fundamental stepping stone. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Troy.
I mean, Troy, have you got anything that you want to promote?
Upcoming books that have been announced, including one that I have collaborated on with Eugenio, a book called Unsung Heroes of Italian Cinema. Hopefully the first in a potential series. You never know. There's definitely room for many more. There it is, the artwork by Julian Yates, which I'm fairly happy with. I like the artwork very much. I think kind of sets the tone of essentially dealing with directors. Well, I mean, it doesn't just have to be directors. Eugenio and I have talked about this, that it could expand out to other people too, who aren't normally considered, whether it be screenwriters or, production designers, etc. But certainly in this context, directors who weren't very prolific. So you wouldn't be able to get an entire book out of Massimo Dallamano or Franco Rossetti, for example. That would be a difficult, tall order. So this is an opportunity to kind of look at, in this particular volume, 3 different directors. So there's that. And also it's been announced, soft announced. I mean, it's not anywhere near to coming out, but I did a book on Alberto De Martino, which may be out this year. I don't know. I'm hoping it might be. Also, with Eugenio's kind collaboration and participation. So there is that. Well, I mean, commentary wise, the announcements just came up. So, I think the three of us literally just recorded the commentary for Macabre, the Lamberto Bava film. There it is. I'll leave it to you to decide which artwork is better. I know which one I prefer. Yeah, that's going to be a really nice release from Vinegar and from Indicator. Identical content, identical master. So, get whatever you like. The doll cover or the licking the candy apple cover, whichever cover you prefer. And then Eugenio and I are also on Mario Bava's 4 Times That Night, which is coming from Indicator, I believe in June. An atypical kind of sexy comedy from Mario Bava, not his usual wheelhouse, but movie I have a great deal of affection for. So, yeah, that'll do for now.
Yeah, I have quite a bit, man. Like it's like every time I turn around, I'm seeing y'all all over all kind of stuff. There's something I come across though, Troy, that I'm interested. I'm gonna go ahead and order this book. But I'd never even until I was like preparing for this, and I was like, wow, what is this about? So it's Innocence Lost. Robert Sigel and the Curse of Lauren. So is that the movie Lauren too? Like, is that?
Yeah, Robert Sigel made a beautiful horror film, very subtle, suggestive, rather disturbing, but very for the time genteel horror film. A German Hungarian co-production called Lauren, which is very much a kind of gothic piece. It's got a mystery component to it, and it's very much indebted to his love of Roman Polanski, I think in particular. But there is a strong kind of quote unquote Euro Gothic quality to it, which is largely coincidental because Robert really hadn't seen a lot of those films at that time. So a lot of people say, oh, it's like Suspiria, it's like Kill Baby Kill, and he hadn't really seen a lot of those films at that time, although he saw them later and admired them very much. It was a book I undertook knowing that it was going to be niche, very super niche, not something that was going to fly off the shelves. Not that any of my books do, except when they're being thrown across the room. But this was very, very niche. And I wrote it because I thought it is one of our functions is to try to shine a light on people who are being neglected, films that are being neglected, not just writing all the time about the big guns, but let's look at other people who aren't as popular. And Robert Sigel is very active on social media. He's a longtime Facebook friend. And I was able to do quite an exhaustive, lifelong covering interview, which provided a rich tapestry of detail that I could work in about his life, his career, making this wonderful, beautiful film that won prizes and was, well reviewed, but didn't do any business at the box office because it was very out of step with the times. And then go on to have this very kind of unfulfilled, tragic career, which is unfortunate, but it makes for, I think, a compelling narrative. And I'm happy with how it turned out. Not surprisingly, those who have read it have said very nice things about it, I'm happy to say. But Robert Sigel is not, he's not a director that's well known. So it was a little bit of an uphill battle.
I didn't have any idea, but that's why, I'm glad y'all do what y'all do, man. Y'all are always, bringing things out that nobody knows about. So, and going on to that, like Nathaniel, man, Mondo Digital. How did you get that started back in, was that 98?
98, yeah, that was kind of the early Wild West days of the internet.
Right.
So yeah, I just finished got out of school and noticed there were all these websites that were very sort of mainstream DVD review sites, but and Laserdisc was still kind of a thing at the time. So, but I noticed that it was either horror or studio stuff, and I was like, well, what about all the other weird stuff in between? And so, so I just kind of taught myself because you couldn't go to school for web design back then really very easily. And yeah, it took off, and yeah, still kicking to this day, keeping me busy on my toes. Yeah, I've kind of stuck with it through thick and thin, through a lot of various industry jobs over the years, and been involved in a lot of films since then that I never thought I would actually be involved in. So, which has been pretty cool.
Yeah, what's good about that website as well is because I like the way you go about your reviews. They're not overly long, but what you do you put in some nuggets like that. If I'm doing we're doing a stream on a Sunday and I want to research a film, I'll go to your review, because you always put stuff in there that I have no idea, and you seem to jam pack it as well, really well. But that website, I think I've been going to that website now for the last 10 years or so. And it's one of the best online. It really is.
Thank you. Yeah. It's kind of funny. There are a few reviews on there that over the last, coming up on 30 years, but yeah, some of those reviews have almost turned into books. I mean, you look at something like Phenomena or Opera or whatever, and those reviews have now, just because the history is so completely insane on those films, it just kind of goes on and on and on, but it's all essential stuff I can't cut. So just how it is. But yeah, good. I'm glad you find it useful. And otherwise,
I also saw the DVD Delirium Volume 1 through 4. They're pretty pricey now, so you
yeah, they are. Yeah, the weird thing is they're sort of like history books now, because originally those were guys who was out on DVD, but now they're sort of like what happened then. Although my latest book is very much around the Fright Fest Guide to Vampire Movies. You can very easily get that.
I did pick that up, and it's like a. I remember. This might sound a little strange to y'all, but when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a vampire. Because they could charm the women, and they could turn into gaseous mist and wolves, and summon things, and I don't know. I'm a weirdo, but no, man, I had to grab this. I was like, holy shit, man.
Well, more importantly, you get to hang out all night, nobody to tell you what to do, sneak in people's houses. Yeah,
that's true.
Right. But I do have some links to some of these, some of y'all's stuff in the description. So,
well, I will say, I want to cut in real quick because he's too modest to do it himself, but Nathaniel is really one of the very few. He's a rarity online in terms of reviewers who do their job. He actually reviews, he watches all of this stuff. He has my deepest sympathy because he sits through some atrocious things. And he has a way of writing them that if you know him as I do, we've never actually been in the same room, but we've been working together now for going on a decade, I guess. And when you know him like I do, I know how to read when he doesn't like something. But he's never mean about it. In private, he can be mean, but never. So I think that deserves a lot of credit.
Yes, I've heard from sources that Troy and I are the same height, but I can't vouch for it because we've never been in the same room. So one of these days. Yeah, eventually.
Right, because we got a question about that as well. We're gonna kind of dip into behind the scenes, the first topic of physical releases and that. So how did, and again go in order, how did you guys get into the physical media scene? And we can start with Eugenio again.
So I was. How did we start collaborating, or how did I?
Just yourself in general, and then if you want to expand on how the three of you got together as well.
Well, I was I was working as an AD. I was working as an AD in film and television. Unfortunately, mostly television. This was before the boom of streaming services, so television was actual TV. I was working mostly in Rome, but I started off in London after having gone to the London Film Academy, and I was working quite a lot. Simultaneously, I was also writing for some magazines in Italy, mostly Notturno Cinema. I became a senior editor on Notturno, and I wrote for Notturno for quite a bit. And yeah, I'm kind of like, I think I'm at the beginning of the second wave of Notturno. And basically, I was interviewing a lot of people for Notturno Cinema, or also other magazines as well. There was Taxi Drivers, which was quite big at the time. I think it's just online now, but at the time, you could find it at newspaper stands, and I was interviewing a bunch of people until it was Mark Thompson Ashworth, who is a dialogue coach, a British dialogue coach, has been living in Rome for decades now, since the early 90s. And I didn't know Mark at the time very well, but we had met, I don't remember through who, and he presented me to a guy who was looking for someone in Italy to produce extras. It was a tiny German label, I mean, and it doesn't exist anymore. And the budget was pretty much nothing. But at the time, to me, it was more of a game. I was making a living as an AD. And one thing after another, then I met Philip Escott, who at the time was working full-time for 88 Films. I met a couple of people that then introduced me to other labels, and at the time it was just me with a camera, terrible, shitty camera, but I had contacts. The budgets were nothing. Also because, I mean, even at the time, 88 Films was very prolific, but it wasn't what it then later became. I mean, what it is now. It was. I don't want to say it was a bargain bin label, but it was definitely, working with very little at the time. So the budgets were, I mean, now Richard and James have really upped their game. It's a magnificent label, but at the time it was rough. And so I started working, and then slowly more work came coming in. And I started expanding, and thankfully for everybody, especially for people that have to watch my stuff, I got professional camera operators, top-notch sound people, editors, and sort of expanded. And so, yeah, that's and at the same time, I a few gigs as an AD really sort of turned me a bit bitter towards the industry. Also, keep in mind, I started at a time in which becoming a first AD meant, which I did eventually become, but meant being treated like shit. Now that sort of toxic behavior on set is less common. I don't want to say it disappeared, but it's less common. At the time, there was this mentality, and it's not an Italian thing. It was the same in the UK as well. In London, when I began, it was, you have to go through a lot of obstacles, a lot of shit is thrown at you. It's kind of a rite of passage. We have to treat you like shit because we were treated like shit before. So, it's kind of, we're doing it for you. It's, all that sort of stuff. It was very hard. It was a different industry. It wasn't that many years ago, but things have changed a lot over the course of the past 10, 15 years.
It sounds like my trade. A little
sorry?
Bit. I said, it sounds like my trade a little bit. I mean, I'm just a painter, but, I mean, the same thing. I mean, you got to,
yeah.
I remember back in the day just getting treated like shit, and you just had to go with it. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is not unique to the film industry, obviously, but there was very much. It was a lot more toxic. I mean, I did learn a lot. To be fair, I did learn a lot, and I think I was a fairly good AD. People were calling me, and but I turned a little sour after a few gigs I didn't really like, and a couple of incidents. But by that time, this thing was really going off, this extras thing, and of course, I had been working for magazines, so it felt very natural. And then kind of went off in a big way. Then, and I was lucky enough to sort of baptize a few labels. I remember when Brian and Jesse contacted me for their very first release, American Rickshaw. Graham Lloyd contacted. Yeah, I mean, it's happened a few times. Graham Lloyd with The Lost Hunter. I met Graham when he was just kind of spitballing the idea of founding a label. So I've kind of, I've grown with many labels, even 88 Films in a way, because, I went through their evolution. And as far as Nathaniel and Troy, we met. I think I met Troy first. We kind of hit it off. I think it was in a New Orleans brothel in 1988 we met, if I recall correctly. But but no, me and Troy, we were friends on Facebook, and I don't know what led us to sort of start a conversation, but we started messaging, and then I think we had a couple of actual calls. And I knew Troy mostly for the audio commentaries. At that time, I don't think I had read any of his books. Later on, of course, but at the time, no. I knew him mainly for the audio commentaries. And he struck me initially as sort of a bit spiky, online. I kind of, when we started communicating, I was like, I have a feeling it's it's one of the two extremes. Either this is a really nice guy, is a great guy, or he's an asshole. One of the two. And it turned out, thankfully, he was both. No, he was lovely. I don't remember a bump in our friendship. He was very easy to talk to, and even when we disagree on something, it's always very it's a very pleasurable conversation and process. And I think Troy.
Yeah, that's
sorry.
That's how me and Darren are. I mean, we disagree on quite a bit, but it's always respectful. It's never.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of crazy. I see people lose their minds and get all emotional, like you have to love this because I love it, kind of thing.
Because I'll unfriend you type thing if you don't
blown
live the same
mind.
as me. Yeah.
Or just an opinion,
I think you do need a baseline. You need sort of, and I think me and Troy, but also Nathaniel, I think we all share sort of a common ground. So yeah. Then I was friends with Nathaniel as well, and Troy introduced me to Nathaniel. Me and Nathaniel actually met in person in London.
Okay.
I think which was wonderful. So yeah, no, they're very, very easy to work with, and every time I'm producing special content for release, it's very easy to think about them because of their level of professionalism, and it's always a pleasurable process.
Okay, awesome. Well, Troy, how'd you get started into the PM game, the physical media game, I guess?
Well, just to follow up on what Eugenio said for one moment, I would say that, it's not my fault that he's occasionally wrong.
Right.
But it does fall upon me to have to correct him gently, like a child. But the first any kind of contact I had with this field was, it was in the early 2000s, maybe closer to like 2010, somewhere like that. I was I was asked to contribute liner notes to a couple of different editions. I worked on a couple of things for Arrow, like Slaughter High and Maniac Cop. I did liner notes for them years and years ago, and I did something for Shriek Show. I contributed to their release of What Have You Done to Solange?
Awesome.
And that didn't really go anywhere. They were just kind of one-off gigs that happened every now and again. Blue Underground got me to do something for Manhattan Baby, little booklet to go along with that. And then the commentaries really arose out of the books. So the fact that I had written a trilogy, effectively, of books on Giallo films made me kind of like, I guess was an obvious choice. Although when the idea was first proposed, it came from Arrow, and I'm like, well, you guys are in the UK. How is this going to work? Technology. Who knew? There are ways of doing these things where you don't have to be in London. So I did that first gig, which was The Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave at the end of 2015. And gradually from there, things went well. And they kept asking me to do more and more and more and more. With Eugenio, Nathaniel was the first one I started working with, because up to a certain point, the first several years, I always worked alone. I always did tracks solo. And then I was asked to do, by Walter Olson, the late Walter Olson, to do a commentary for Conquest, Lucio Fulci's Conquest. And I thought, oh boy, I'd like to do it, but that's going to be a tough one to do alone. So I knew that Nathaniel was like an omnipresent kind of presence in this thing. So I reached out to him, and we did our first track together in 2019, and it went really well. And so we kept working together. Eugenio, I remember, I think he first came onto my radar because of his documentary on Italian possession movies, which was on the Arrow release of Beyond the Door, which is a movie I'm not that nuts about, but I had to buy it because I wanted to see this documentary. And I was very impressed by that. And then I read his book, Darkening the Italian Screen. And I think it was because I was having this idea. Yeah, that's the second one. The first one.
That's the one you'd read.
Yeah, that's the first one. Was the one I read. Had a very long interview with Umberto Lenzi, best interview with Lenzi I'd ever read. So I reached out to Eugenio pretty much to say, I'm doing this project. I mean, to be fair, it's published, so as long as I quote you, it's all fair game. But I wanted to reach out to, are you okay with me, using quotes? And absolutely. And it just kind of went from there. We started collaborating on writing projects. He's brought me onto several of his writing projects. I brought him into mine. Obviously, he's been a tremendous gold mine of information. So yeah, it was one of those things with both of them, as far as I'm concerned anyway. I can't speak for them, but it started as kind of a professional thing, but it's become, I would say, a real friendship, which is nice. It's a very heartwarming tale.
And that comes through as well when like your commentary tracks, when you listen to it. It's not just like listening to three
people that don't know each other. Like
you've got a kind of camaraderie about you all, and that's what I think they're most.
I like to create. It sounds hokey, but it's just like sitting with people, sitting with friends, listening to friends talk about the films. It's not just riffing, but there's facts, there's data, there's context, there's we all three of us, I think, have a really great kind of base knowledge of film history in general, but certainly the particular films that we're talking about. But it's try not to make it sort of stiff and stodgy and like a lecture, which I find very, very off-putting.
Right.
Yeah. So Nathaniel, yourself, how did you get started with the physical media stuff?
So I was a physical media junkie pretty much when VHS started. I was a little kid when, little mom and pop video stores were starting, and I noticed that, and I'd grown up watching stuff like, Black Sabbath, Kiss of the Vampire, stuff like that on TV, and I was noticing all these weird little Italian movies under different titles turning up, especially like on the bottom shelf of video stores. I was like, oh, what is this? Who's this Ruggero Deodato guy? What is this? What are these movies? Um, so this was in the 80s, and so I started, just watching as much as I could. As soon as I was old enough, I worked at a video store during high school, and I obviously started Mono Digital. And as soon as I got out, I moved to LA, got a job at DreamWorks for a couple of years when they were first starting out, working on like Gladiator and American Beauty, that kind of stuff, and had a chance to work for Image Entertainment, who, if you were around back in the day, but they were kind of one of the two big players in Laserdisc, but they moved to DVD, and they did the whole EuroShock line of DVDs, which were lots of just a crazy array of like Italian and French and British horror movies, like all the Pete Walkers, things like that. And I was managing the Something Weird line, Shaw Brothers, all that kind of stuff, and which meant there were no rules when we were kind of making it up. So basically I got to develop the special features, whatever I wanted to do, basically, as long as it didn't blow the budget out, it was fine. Oversaw the packaging, the marketing, that kind of thing. But there were cases where they would just need a commentary, and I was like, well, I'm sitting here in the office, so I'll just do it because I know everything about this movie. So it just happened. So for example, they did a deal with Studio Canal, and one of the titles on there, they thought it was an art film. It was called Apocalypse Domani. Oh, some like an Antonioni movie. I was like, no. Like, grab it, get that movie. And of course, after they acquired it, and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, it's Cannibal Apocalypse. And so I just went to town and did a bunch of special features for that one. So yeah, I just kind of rose from, went from there. So my first commentaries were mainly because I was there and I was the only person who knew anything about these crazy things we were picking up. And so then once Image just kind of got bought by a different company, they're kind of just a filing cabinet right now. But through that process, but I knew a lot. It's being in LA, it's kind of a small pond in a way, because there are a lot of labels here that I got to know. I mean, I got to know Bill Lustig of Blue Underground, and David Gregory was working there at the time before he went off to be with Severin. Don May obviously was in town all the time, so I knew him, who runs Synapse. All these folks, a lot of folks who went off to do be with like Arrow and even Vinegar Syndrome. It's everybody started off at different labels, so it kind of goes around. But I knew all these folks, and so they would just start coming to me and being like, "Hey, we can do a commentary for this?" I was like, "Sure, love to." And Troy, I knew obviously I knew from his very first Barney and Bava book. I knew him back from the Mobius, Home Forum days and 80 Maniacs and all that kind of stuff. And but I think what really cinched us together was again, Walt Olson was working on a special edition of Opera, and had asked me to do a commentary, and I was like, of course I could do that, blindfolded easily. So I cranked it out, and then it wound up taking much longer. I think it was like maybe almost a year later. He was like, he was like, I need more content for Opera. I got to get some more stuff. And I was like, well, ask Troy. I mean, the guy's like insanely knowledgeable. He knows these movies. Like, why don't you ask him? And so he asked Troy, and so Troy wound up doing a track on that as well. But the way these things kind of go around is obviously Severin eventually years later inherited it to do the UHD, and so then Troy and I did a new track together. So it was just kind of funny how these things keep sort of coming around. These movies keep popping up over and over again. But like you said, so then Conquest came up, and it's just kind of been one thing after another. And sometimes we'll do like 2 or 3 commentaries a week. Sometimes it really varies. But like, right. I just finished doing something for one label. I just did like all 3 discs in a set that's going to be announced in about a month. It's very Euro, but it's not crypty. There's no horror, but it's very Italian and has some Italian horror names connected. But that'll be announced in about a month. But that was kind of a really big project that I just finished. It's been fun, and you always learn something. And I think we're usually on the same page. I think as far as I think Troy and I only disagree on one movie that I can think of offhand. It's a contentious Roman Polanski movie.
Oh, well, you're wrong. It's fine. It's okay, you're allowed to be wrong.
It's a terrible Polanski movie, but
it's not.
But other than that, I think all 3 of us are usually about on the same page.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I tend to sometimes be a little bit more a little more harsh in some things, whereas Nathaniel is very, Nathaniel, it tends to be a little more positive. So it's sort of the yin and yang balance each other out, sort of a thing. And Eugenio is perhaps somewhere in the middle.
Right. It definitely works, man. That kind of goes to the next question, man, that I got for y'all. Now, how do y'all start a commentary? Do y'all is there like is this like free flow? Is it like y'all strongly prepared? Like I mean, how do you decide what you're going to talk about? All that, like, you know, I don't know.
Well, in my case, well, sort of I think the modus operandi when it comes to commentaries changes on the basis of you know, how many people are participating and all that.
Okay.
I mean, I just want to kind of give a shout out to some other people that I contact as well. I mean, I've thrown a lot of work in Rachel Nisbet's direction, who is somebody that I really like. I think she does very good work. I've also tagged along some Italians over the years, Nanni Cobritti, for example. He's done stuff for me, both with me, but also solo. And yeah, and you know, latching on what we've been talking about, to me, you know, over the years, as labels have given me more responsibilities, and you know, now I'm also disc producing as well as content producing. I like to think I've created a little community of like-minded people that you know, have a certain degree of you know, professionalism, but also light-heartedness, which I appreciate. And I have a limit, which is I need to work with people I like. You know, when it comes to clients, it's something different. When it comes to labels, you know, you have to deal with a number of in-house people. Some you like less, but when it comes to the people I hire, I like to work with people that I like. Yeah, so specifically when it comes to the work with Troy and Nathaniel, I mean, I don't, and I know I rarely do this, but I know I can speak for both of them when I say that none of us would accept work for something we don't have a strong knowledge of beforehand.
Right. Yeah.
Like I would never go with you know, there are certain, even films I love, but if I don't feel I'm bringing anything to the game, then I'm not going to do it. I think, you know, it's better if somebody that has dug deeper and has explored that arena, you know, they should do it. So you know, if we're all doing something, that means that, you know, we know what we're talking about. And yeah, there's, as far as I'm concerned, I don't prepare that much because of this reason. I obviously rewatched the film, and I have generic sort of notes, you know, sort of like things I want to touch on, but I don't script, also mostly because it just doesn't work.
Mostly free flow then. Just
it's free flow. It's free flow. Sometimes, you know, we will have, before recording, we'll have sort of a quick chat about, you know, does anybody want to, you know, has any specific moments they need to be able to talk about something that's happening on screen? Does anybody, you know, have any specific requirements for this? You know, we'll have a sort of a general prep, but no, it's free flowing. When it's multiple commentators, scripted stuff just doesn't work. It would be a strange disconnect if one or two people are, you know, sort of exactly that, free flowing, and another person is reading a script. That would just be bizarre. Yeah, it's it pretty much, yeah, it comes down to just knowing what we're talking about, and then having that sort of synergy.
What's the like time period from when you're asked to do a commentary track till it's completely done? You know, you've got it in the bag.
I'm sure the deadlines vary, right? Or...
Yeah.
The deadlines vary. I mean, in my case, the commentary comes with a package. I am asked sometimes by the label or by Troy and Nathaniel, who will ask me to participate in something they've been asked to do. But most of the times, I'm given the extras to produce and a budget, so it's usually ample time. We've usually got ample time. I say ample. I mean, ample is, varies. It can be, a few months. It could be a month. But yes, I sort of usually give Troy and Nathaniel a heads up well in advance when possible. But of course, there are also aspects because, for example, me as a content producer, I'm working at the same time the authoring team is working or they're restoring the film. Sometimes we need to wait for a master to be available to be able to do the commentary. Because the film has never had a release or only on VHS, or it's the uncut version, which is longer, for example. So maybe I know we have to do the commentary months ahead, but then in effect, we only have like maybe a week or two to do it. So that happens as well. It varies.
Okay.
So same like question really for Troy. Are you more... Do you have a lot of notes in front of you, Troy, or are you just exactly the same kind of... Because obviously doing streams with yourselves and that, and we know it's all up there. You don't need... It amazes me and Dirk how kind of fluent
not all of it's up there, believe me.
Well, in the club. But no, yeah, how would you go about it yourself? Is it very similar to Eugenio?
Yeah, well... There are a few things I want to add. First of all, the time frame thing is funny that Nathaniel mentioned opera, the Scorpion release, because that was literally proposed to me it was either a Tuesday morning or a Wednesday morning. I can still remember getting up in the morning and there was a message from Walt Olson in my messages. Would you like to do a commentary for opera? Oh, of course. And he said, I need it by this weekend. Oh,
wow.
Well, okay. Sure. I said yes, because I know the film extremely well, and why not? I can do it. So I did it. But then it sat for over a year, which was a I was a little annoyed by that, but it is what it is. We've had Eugenio and I have had occasions where we've recorded things that have sat now for 3 years for mysterious reasons, but these things do happen. But as far as how I approach them,
and they're masterpieces too that you're waiting on. I know what they are.
I know they are certainly, but
horror.
The world is clamoring. But when I work alone, so when I first started, I did use the script, not within an inch of its life, because without mentioning names, there are people I listen to who I can tell are just reading literally from a script the entire time.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is less of a problem if you at least modulate the tone of your voice. But if you don't, it becomes, you just want to fall asleep. I try, even in the beginning, I tried to leave wiggle room for a little bit of improvisation and just kind of, riffing on ideas and stuff like that. When you're working alone, you do need more of that kind of structure. So I will have some kind of an outline that I have prepared. When I'm working with, whether it's just Nathaniel or Eugenio, and I've worked with other people too, some of whom the synergy just wasn't there, and the rapport just wasn't there for one reason or another. You can't really script it, but I do have notes prepared. Sometimes I will have a time-coded thing like, mention this at this point if possible. It's not always possible because sometimes, people are talking and I don't want to just cut them off and say, hey, shut up, I want to talk about this. So sometimes it just passes by. That's life, but it is a different discipline when you're recording with other people. But like Eugenio said, I mean, if the rapport is there, the chemistry, whatever you want to call it, is there, it comes across very well, and I think it's probably more interesting to listen to. But there is a big difference between doing commentaries with somebody else versus working alone. Working alone, it's a little harder in some respects because you have to do all the lifting yourself. But if you prepare and you're not just sort of riffing, making it up as you go along, that probably makes it a little bit easier on that level. But it does require work. I mean, it's not just a question of I'm just going to make it up. No, I prepare. Obviously I have my notes and I refer to them as needed.
Have you guys, a quick question as well, have you guys ever done a commentary track and you've like sat down and thought you didn't like the way it came out, so you had to redo it? And how many takes, were they usually just done in one take and then you get a little bit of editing, to cut out maybe some of the ums and ahs, or I don't know what have you. But are they literally just done in one take most of the time?
Typically, Nathaniel will talk more about that because he's our guru who tries to make us sound good. But I have had occasions. We've had occasions where we've started and then it's just a cluster for one reason. It's like, okay, just start over.
Right. Yeah.
It happens. It's not the end of the world. Or sometimes it can be fixed in the editing. Just keep talking. It's fine. We'll cut it out. I have had occasions in the past where I've gotten like halfway through and I'm thinking, I don't think this is turning out well. Now in your head, you think every little mistake, every little, you stumble over a word or something, you magnify and you think, oh God, This sounds awful. Yeah. When you listen to it, it's like, that's fine. But I have literally in some cases, it's embarrassing. But at one time, when I record alone, obviously I'll pause every now and again, take a drink, do something. I might need to think for a minute. What am I going to say next? And I realized to my horror, after having done like 20 minutes and I paused and I got through the bulk of the movie, I forgot to hit the pause again. So I had to start all over again. That kind of thing has happened.
Oh, okay. What about yourself, Nathaniel? How do you go about them?
Yeah, so, similar to Troy, if I do a solo track, which I don't do tons of them, but now and again I will. But yeah, those, I wouldn't say they're necessarily fully scripted, but I will have a lot of notes in front of me, sort of with blocks of where I need to jump in and hit certain notes. So yeah, those tend to be a little more stressful, just because if you've ever done a solo commentary, by the time you get to the 1 hour mark, there's this sort of like fatigue that sets in. You're like, oh my God, I have like, I need 30 more minutes, another hour or whatever. So you got to make sure you're sort of ready for that, and you have to make sure you get your second win. Sometimes you have to do multiple sessions for it to keep it going. But some movies, I mean, like opera, for example, I sped through solo just fine. Or like Watch Me When I Kill, I agreed to do for Synapse solo, just because like, sure, it's a fun movie, I can do that one pretty easily. But that one I had a lot of notes for, just to be sure, because there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I wasn't quite as up on as an Argento film. So it varies on the movie. And again, with the label, sometimes I had a similar scenario to Troy, where I was I got a call on a Wednesday and they were like, hey, we're putting this out and we're doing it last minute, and if you can do a commentary by Saturday, that'd be great. I'm like, what? And normally I would have been like, God, no. But it was a movie I really liked, and it would have been a shame not to do it because they weren't using the pre-existing extras. And I was like, fine. So I made an exception in that case, probably to the detriment of my physical well-being. But normally, it's nice to have at a minimum, I'd like to have a month out just so I can sort of get prepped, get in the headspace, and kind of go back and reread it, watch old extras if there are any, get sort of get up to speed. So if it's less than a month, I tend to not. And I actually turn down way more tracks than I do. I think people will be shocked if they knew how many tracks that commentators say no to, because you get these lists of stuff. They're like, oh, I'd like you to do these, and I'm just like, I don't know anything about some of these movies, like I have nothing to contribute on that. So yeah, there's no vanity there. It's like I would much rather like the more qualified person do a track who's suited for it. I don't want to hug up a job that I don't think I do a good job on. But yeah, it varies. And when we do a track, obviously, sometimes you have bits where you'll be chit-chatting and you'll just say the wrong name of something. Sometimes you don't even realize it. We'll call each other up and be like, oh, you said so-and-so when you meant so-and-so. And, and you'll have to go back and just patch it in, but it's not that bad. the main problem I've had, and we don't really have that much anymore, but when Troy mentioned 2019 is when we started, but when the pandemic hit, there was a rough patch of about 6 months where Skype was still around before it got sucked up into Teams, and Zoom was kind of really getting off the ground, but they hadn't gotten the kinks out. So there were a couple of tracks where just little gremlins were in the system. And so the one that almost like drove me to become like a raging alcoholic was when we did Sleepless for Walt, because I couldn't figure out what was happening. But for some reason on Zoom, Troy and I were slightly out of sync with each other. And so we kept like accidentally like trampling on each other. So trying to fix, and it was making me, again, this was like early pandemic days. So I was like, what is happening? What's wrong with this track? Why is this all screwy? So that was just impossible. It turned out fine. You would never know listening to it now what happened. But just the editing on that after the fact was horrible. But you know, and yeah, like Troy said, I'm actually even if it's just a track with just Troy and Eugenio, a lot of time I'll be there. I'm the guy doing the mixing and hitting the buttons anyway, so I'll know what their track sounds like as soon as it's being done. So which helps when I review it later. So yeah, it's a case by case with the movie, but mainly you just sort of you look at the film and decide what's going to be best for it and how much do I know and what can I bring to the table, and yeah, just make sure you don't contradict each other or say something that makes each other look stupid. That's the main thing.
Okay. Yeah.
It is. I have to say, it is annoying sometimes when Troy's vocal coach interrupts to give him pointers when we're mid commentary. That can be annoying.
Oh, don't talk about Chris Christopher like that. He's a sweet.
He's sleeping on the couch now, so he's not here to be offended.
He's cracking the whip sometimes. What are some of the ways that new releases get brought to your attention? Like, like,
you mean like how do jobs come to us?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Eugenio certainly has a lot to say on that, I know, but in my case, sometimes it is as simple as they just ask me, which is nice. Every now and again, I try not to be too bad about it, but you kind of got to rustle the trees occasionally and say, hey, you got anything in the pipeline? Well, as a matter of fact, we do. We're doing this. Yeah, I'd like to do that. So every now and again, the mountain doesn't come to Muhammad, you go the other way around. But well, a lot of work these days is due to our friend in Rome.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in my case, I'm usually, let's say, so it's complicated. It comes down to the labels. Each label I have a different kind of rapport, different kind of relationship with. There's some people, some labels, I should say, that I have pretty much a consistent relationship with. I'm talking to Vinegar Syndrome pretty much every week. I know what they're trying to acquire, what they are, what they're just thinking of maybe one day releasing. So I'm very in tune with everything they're doing. Same goes with 88 Films, same goes with Cauldron. Other labels, it's a bit more detached. So they'll send me an email kind of giving me a rough idea of what their plan is, and sort of, maybe asking for an opinion. And there are many labels that fall into that category. Arrow, Play on Pictures, another label I'm very close with is Annulus Entertainment in Germany, or Treasured Film. So it kind of comes down to the sort of relationship I have with each label. But generally speaking, I'm kind of kept up to date about what they're doing. Sometimes a label will contact me before acquiring a title and saying, what do you think? Do you foresee any problems with this title when it comes to extras, or or because that one has to also point out that not everybody working within these labels are necessarily experts about what they're releasing. There all motivated, or I'd like to think they're motivated by a passion, by cinephilia. But at the same time, it's a business. So, they kind of get a feeling of what works, what sells, but they don't necessarily know the films. So, and, there are also some funny stories tied to this, but, for obvious reasons, I can't tell them. But, so I'm kind of kept up to speed. With some labels, I have such a relationship where they'll just basically give me a budget and say, we trust you, go do whatever you have to do, as long as, this is the deadline, as long as we have everything by this time, we're good. Other labels are more hands-on and want to have specific sort of idea of what I'm going to be doing. But there's a level of trust. Very rarely it happens that, an idea is shot down. There's usually a conversation, a Zoom call in which we discuss with some labels what can be done. Obviously, it all boils down to budget, to time and budget. They have to give me one of the two. I worked also when both those things were lacking, but usually, to make things work, either it's a healthy budget or ample time. I can give an example. I produced special features for Arrow's release of Red Sonja recently.
Oh, okay.
And the budget was there. I have Arrow absolutely, impeccable when it comes to that. But I had I think a month and a half to deliver everything. And that means, fully edited pieces, commentary, booklet, the whole shebang in a month and a half. And that was challenging, really challenging. And if you look at the extras, it's packed. I mean, whatever one might think of what I've done, it's undoubtedly absolutely stacked with special features. I'm fairly happy with that release. But so yeah, it's labels contact me nowadays. I don't sort of nudge labels. So the work comes. I've established relationships with them, and they just contact me, and we get stuff done. But going back, yes, I would definitely give them a nudge once in a while, kind of remind them I existed. But nowadays, no, it's their established relationship. In fact, new labels come. I've over the past 6 months, I've started collaborations with Studio S Entertainment in Sweden. We worked a few times back in the day, but they stopped doing Italian stuff for a long time, and we're using mostly archival. But now we've circled back, and we're working. I'm working again with the Wicked Visions in Germany. So yeah, it's a continuous flux.
Okay, so you're like given a free role, really, and then is that where you come into things? You will contact Troy then and Nathaniel,
yes,
and bring them into
Nathaniel. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Now I kind of I know what Nathaniel and Troy are kind of in tune with. I can usually figure out what they're willing to do. But obviously there are other people as well. I mean, I mentioned Rachel, there's Nanny, and obviously other people I hire for video essays and booklets, Mike Foster, Pier Maria Bocchi, Alessio Di Rocco. I mean, there are many. There are many people. A lot of Italians I bring because I feel they on certain titles, they bring a level of contextualization that is important. But I contact a bunch of people and get things rolling.
Make it happen, huh? So
it's make it happen.
That kind of answers another question: why sometimes releases are lacking in the features. Like there'll be like nothing on some some additions, so you kind of cleared that up too because of the budget, I guess. So
Yeah.
What would I'll ask Nathaniel this. What would the typical, because you said earlier about you've got so many projects on the go. What would the typical week be for you? And I obviously don't mention what you're working on at the moment, but how many projects are you all working on individually at this moment in time? Is it like half a dozen or 3 or 4 or what have you?
It depends. I mean, like I said, I just wrapped up a pretty big one where it was a 3-disc set that I was juggling all of that at the same time. So that was a big one. My day job kind of ate up my this month. So if you know, do all stuff with the Oscars, so that actually put the brakes on me for a little while. So now I'm getting back. But yeah, usually I'd say there's about maybe there's at least like 3 or 4 in some form of progress going on at the same time. That's pretty common, I would say, depending on what it is. And sometimes it'll be a huge one. And in addition to what Eugenio said, sometimes Eugenio will bring stuff and we'll sort of have an idea like, oh, let's set the dates to record this, this, and this. We'll have maybe 1 or 2 commentaries, that we do on a weekend. Sometimes one of us will get wind that a label's working on something and we're like, oh, we'd love to do this. Something like an example, like something like Four Flies and Grey Velvet, for example. I just happened to be hanging out with Severin News as soon as they were in the process of getting it, and I was just like, oh my God, Troy, we got to get this movie. And that was like months and months ahead. So you had a long time to get ready for that one. So it, again, it varies, but yeah, I'd say on average, maybe like 3 or 4 at a time is pretty common.
Okay. This should be a fun one. So we're going to be talking about unreleased Italian horror films that need a physical release. And by that, I mean, have you got, all 3 of you, have you got kind of any films that you're not working on for, are they in like...
something you can't speak on.
Yeah, are they like rights to certain films, music rights that you can't, these films you can't get hold of, or they're not having a release? And I'll say that by an example, like say Diodato Body Count, that hasn't come out. I think everyone's waiting for it to come out. What are some of the unreleased Italian horror films that you would love to see come out that you're not working on at the moment?
That that probably, or it could be that probably never will come out.
Right, I can give you a couple of examples if you want. So for me, it'd be like Diodato style Help, The Washing Machine, Lipstick, Il Risotto from 1960, Something Creeping in the Dark, Anguish, 1987, the Spanish horror film. Just why do you think some of these films are not getting great releases? Is it rights issues or?
I'll add a couple of titles in that I really like to see released. You mentioned Body Count, yes. You'll Die at Midnight, Lamberto Bava, which is like the missing puzzle in his 80s filmography, puzzle piece. Those are a couple right there that but at the same time, it's been extraordinary seeing some of the things that have come out, even things we didn't work on, like Hyena in the Safe. I never expected that. So I was very happy about that. There's more, but those are just a couple that popped into my head. But Eugenio certainly knows a great deal as far as like the obstacles that are posed with some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, for some labels, I work researching rights holders for films, and sometimes I act on personal taste. I brought a lot of films to Vinegar specifically, not exclusively, but with Vinegar I sort of acted as a researcher and then middleman for a number of different films, Witch Story, Maya, Spectres, others. I'm going completely blank now, but Masseuse, AAA Masseuse, the Vidani film. So there are a few.
Yeah, I love that one for sure.
Yeah. So when it comes to Italian films, it's complicated. Why certain films don't get released depends on a number of factors. You have to keep in mind that not all obviously, but a large number of companies went bankrupt some in the 70s, some in the 80s, some later on in the 90s. And they were kind of, their catalog was broken down and assimilated by other companies. Some are indeed entrapped within issues. For example, there are a number of films that I was looking for that are owned by literal banks. Like banks own the rights for those films.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Because banks will get any asset which is worth a dime. When a company is folds. So there is that issue. So finding the rights holder is and then they end up in weird place. Now I can't mention the title, but a film I was tracking down is owned by a pet store because literally simply because a relative of the rights holders has a pet store, and it's in the pet store's company's name. So that pet store owns that film. So it's you have to find the stuff, and you have to hope they have materials. They have an actual master. There is a saying within this business, which is who has the master in Italian. It's actually, but translated is who has the master dictates the rules. You can have all the the paperwork that says you own the film, but if you don't have the master, there's nothing to talk about.
So possession is 9/10 of the law, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. You mentioned somebody mentioned, I think it was you, Darren, mentioned body count, right?
Yeah.
So the problem with body count is this. It's in a summarizing very quickly. So it is owned. Body count is owned by a French company, not an Italian company. It's a French company. The thing is, the master is owned by the Italian producer of the film. The Italian producer of the film is convinced that he indeed has the rights. He doesn't, and the paperwork shows he doesn't. So basically, a company would have to be willing to pay the rights twice and pay for the access to the master. So basically, to release that film, you would have to dish out an amount of money which is just not viable for the market. It's an insane amount of money,
Right?
Because the French company says, we own the film. Here is the document that proves it. Pay us. But he has the master. So if he says jump, if you want the master, you jump. So and there are many situations like this. So it's kind of, you get a lot of douchebags online kind of going, what? Nobody's released this film. And it's like, yeah, well, thank God you're here to save the day. Nobody had actually thought about that. But it's, there are a lot of people trying to unblock situations. But it's complicated. It's I'll give you another example. There's a film by a good friend of mine. I love the man. He's a fantastic person. Director Gianni Martucci. Gianni, who would be perfect for an Unsung Heroes. One of the subsequent books. Gianni, I've been trying to get his films out for a long time. Pretty much all 5 of the films he directed, he was mostly a writer, but the 5 films he directed have not had really good releases. And mind you, I mean, they're not masterpieces, they're not great films, but they're entertaining for what they are. And I really want to see Gianni's stuff being released. And I know that a company in Milan owns one of these films. They're fucking not answering the phone. Like I even got people to go in Milan to go and knock at the door. There's an office, but there's no life behind behind the windows. That nobody's answering, and I don't know what to do. So it's complicated.
Ken
Okay.
Russell's The Devils would be a big one. That like
I don't think that's ever gonna be
Yeah.
released properly.
I guess.
Nathaniel,
Well-
have you got any titles that you would love to see come out?
Yeah, well, I'll just add, if Paramount does indeed buy Warner Brothers, you never know. Maybe they'll be like, screw it, put the Devils out. I don't know. But
Hopefully.
yeah,
Mhm.
weird things have happened. First of all, I have to take Troy to task to his list. He did not actually say Ghosts of Sodom, so shame on you.
Or
Oh.
Black Demons.
Yeah, or Black Demons, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Black
Yeah.
Demons, yeah. Oh.
But even apart from like horror, I mean, look at like Violent Naples.
Oh yeah, the crime films alone, yeah. Well, and there's and if you listen to if you listen to our Giallo tracks, I mean, we're always rattling off. There's so many Gialli that still have not come out. They never even got legit DVD releases. I mean, there's things like The Double is one that I keep banging the drum on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Eye in the Labyrinth.
Yeah, I mean, we have we have a really screwy Blu-ray with bad audio on that one. Or like Death Knocks Twice.
Yeah.
I mean, there's tons of these things that are still stuck in limbo. A lot of Pupi Avati films I'd love to see come out. There's one that nobody knows outside of Italy called The Hideout, which I really like a lot with Treat Williams. I'd love to see a good version of that. There's so many. But I'd say the Giallo is and a lot of the cop films. There's a huge untapped well of those that are still. I mean, and Vinegar Syndrome's certainly doing their Forgotten Jolly line, but they could keep those going for probably another decade, and still there'd be tons left.
Right.
That's one of our future questions, actually.
That's
'cause
one
we
of the
yeah.
Can they
Go on,
sustain
sorry.
that box set line for how long?
Oh, that particular one could go on past
Yeah.
our lifetimes, probably. There's so many. I mean, if you look at the list of actual Jolly out there, I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Things that barely got a VHS release in Italy, if that, it's insane. So I'd love to see
got that on pre-order, and I do have. So I'll have all 9 editions. So I'll have all 9 volumes.
I mean, there are even some bigger titles that, like, The Sweet Body of Deborah got a German release, but it could do with an upgrade, certainly. And that's
great.
one. I mean, would you put that in a forgotten set? I don't know about that, but certainly it's a title that deserves a deluxe edition. The Double you mentioned is another great one. There's a lot, and of course that also gets into the whole what is and what isn't a Giallo thing, which we'll be here all day if we start opening that box. But believe me, that line could go on for a very long time.
Don't say the F word, Troy.
Yeah, I know.
I would say Formula for a Murder too. I mean, that's one.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Just got the Shameless DVD. That's all we got for that, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Well, there's a really beautiful French Blu-ray Formula for Murder, but there's no English on it. So the master's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I just watched Human Cobras. I found it.
Yeah.
But there was no English dubs, so I had to watch it in Italian. And I still watched it, but it's a little different watching
The
film.
DVD to that is bad as well, because I have got the DVD and it's awful. It's in cropped at the sides. It's not a very great picture.
Well, it's Maya, isn't it? That was kind of a bootleg.
Maya. Yeah. I mean, I like the last 30 minutes of that film, but the first hour I'm not a big fan of. But who knows? That might pop up. On one of these forgotten jolly sets.
Since you brought up Maya, that brings up another problem that we have. It was a big problem a while ago, but the fact that you have these labels that are gray market, where they actually don't have the rights to these films, they put out these horrible editions, but they ruin it for anyone to actually license them legitimately and properly, because then they think there's no market for it because it's already out on DVD. Why should we actually pay money to actually get it legitimately if it's if there's already this garbage VHS scan that somebody threw out there, which is too bad. But there are actually some titles that have been really complicated by that factor because a label like Maya did a bad version of it. And so you'll see sometimes they'll change the name when they put something out, they'll alter it so people don't confuse it with the DVD that's already out, because some of the retailers don't want to stock something that they've already had that was a bad release. So it gets really complicated with some of these.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
I guess we're on to can y'all mention some Giallo adjacent films that you love? Kind of like I would say not a true Giallo, like American Giallo, like
like
say Dress
Basic
to Kill.
Instinct or something.
I wrote a whole book on that.
Night School. Oh yeah, that book is amazing as well.
I mean, there's a ton of them. Obviously, and again, it gets controversial. Some people say, no, that's not fair to classify it that way. But movies that have unmistakable kind of echoes of the Giallo are from, virtually every country that makes films. There are Turkish examples, Greek, French, German, British, Canadian, American, Mexican. I mean, it's all over the place. Japanese, the big obvious titles are things like, some of Brian De Palma's thrillers, for example, like Dressed to Kill and Body Double.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can see the Giallo influence, and it's something that John Carpenter talked about explicitly with regards to Halloween, that he wanted to make something that was, like a Dario Argento movie. And so he stripped it down to the bare essentials and made this wonderful film that, obviously helped to usher in a whole era of slasher movies. So the slasher movie has a very real relationship with that as well. Think of movies like My Bloody Valentine, for example, and even Friday the 13th. The original Friday the 13th is indeed a mystery.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I had a few that I was going to mention that are from my childhood. Still of the Night, 1982, which I hear nobody really talk about, but I just remember that dream sequence scene with the teddy bear. It's like green light, and she pulls the button off the eye and the blood's coming out. I mean, it stuck with me as a child, Blackout, 1985, the HBO original movie, and Jagged Edge from 1985. I would consider those Giallo adjacent, but
and a really early example is one that it still flummoxes me a little bit, because the people involved in the making of the film weren't the type of people that would have been watching Blood and Black Lace, but I see a lot of it in Freddie Francis's movie The Psychopath, Amicus film from 1965. I mean, that's real early on, and it's got scenes in it that are unmistakably very similar, but again, sometimes coincidences do happen.
Right.
Oh yeah, I think for me, I think the perfect example would be Don't Look Now. I mean, that's in my top 3 films of all time. I absolutely love that film. I mentioned Night School. That's kind of got the slasher thing going, and it's definitely got What Have You Done to Your Daughter's vibes. And what do you guys think of Perfect Blue, the Japanese animation? Because that's almost like a Dario Argento film. That I recently covered. I love that film as well. Yeah. There's not too many examples, I don't think, of that. Them type films, really.
Well, I mean, when it comes, so I will, I'll go a little bit against the grain here. What we're talking about, in the sense, I have kind of problems when it comes to the classification of gialli, because I mean, I don't deny the existence, obviously, of a genre such as the giallo one, and it's plain to see, that to a certain degree you can codify it. But at the same time, a lot of the films fall into that category. I mean, obviously, the premise should be that the term giallo, obviously, as many people know by now, in Italian just means mystery story, and everything falls into that category. May it be Agatha Christie, and giallo is just a word you use to identify something that is a mystery. It's a bit sort of emphatic and a little over the top as a term. So you would use it with a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek element, but it essentially just means mystery story. And of course, it goes back to the Giallo Mondadori books that were yellow, but they were Raymond Chandler, they were noirs, they were Agatha Christie, very, very different kind of films. The term gialla all'italiana, which identifies the filmic strain, sort of starts out very casually. It's and just simply means this is a mystery story that is takes place in Italy and is made by Italians. That pretty much how it begins. A lot of the common traits stem from producers asking the directors to replicate some sort of atmosphere. So, like, we, do whatever you want, but, as long as it's kind of reminds us of Dario Argento, or, this film came out last year, it really did well for us. Can you do something similar? Yes, then narrative elements as well as iconographic elements kind of turn up, and you can code, the giallo, but it is very loose to me. Maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe it's because I'm Italian, but I've never been particularly enraptured in the very Anglo-Saxon conversation about what is and isn't a giallo, which has never really been a thing in Italy. I've never, even at the time when I was writing for Notturno, I don't remember any conversations about that. Giallo was just used, as a general term, and then you'd have to specify exactly what it is. What role does it have within this macro container? But yeah, that is which is not taking away anything from the conversations at hand, but it's something I've always had difficulties engaging in. And one could discuss this on a much larger scale, like, there's that saying, genres were invented by Blockbuster, by rentals to, know where to put the films, which is of course facetious, but at the same time, you could make the case that really it is more a marketing thing than it is, an artistic, creative aspect. But I would add there are Italian films that have not been considered gialli, but have giallo elements, because to me the most striking element is the visual one, the color schemes. To me that says giallo all'italiana more than any knife wielding killer. And in that case, there's one film that I'm trying to convince a specific label to release, and they might, which is but I can mention the name because it's if it's ever going to be released, it's going to be God knows when, which is Lips of Lurid Blue, which is a 1975 erotic drama, but and if you read the synopsis, you would never think it has anything to do with giallo. But then there are some sequences photographed by Gabor Pogani which are incredibly giallo-esque, and I find that sort of idiosyncrasy, visual contradiction very very interesting.
There's also that aspect of, films, trying to classify films as exclusively being one thing,
right?
Which is something we've discussed before, that, of course, films can be multiple things. I mean, some gialli, and as Eugenio says, of course, we use the term differently than Italians do. It has a different connotation, but in terms of the sort of general fandom perception of what is a giallo, it tends to mean a certain very specific thing, a kind of a lurid atmosphere, something that's stylized, something that's a little bit, at times sleazy or what have you, not necessarily always violent, sometimes sexual, sometimes psychological, but some gialli are indeed also horror films. Sometimes you find elements of the giallo working its way into Westerns, obviously, For a Few Dollars More, Once Upon a Time in the West, Death Rides a Horse. There are a bunch of films that have kind of giallo-esque elements in them, at least in terms of how we tend to think of it. The riddle, the mystery, the childhood trauma, that kind of a thing that's threaded through these films. So very often there is this desire to just lump something into one specific thing And it's not always as simple and straightforward as that. And I think, as Eugenio kind of indicates, it's not usually that, I think Dario Argento definitely was doing something very specific and he knew exactly what he was doing. I don't know that a lot of these other guys were sitting on saying, I'm going to make a Giallo. I want to make a Giallo now. Very often it wasn't even their idea. It was something that was assigned, kind of as a general concept, like Eugenio says, make something that's a little bit like Deep Red or whatever. Do what you want to with it. And that's just the practical reality of filmmaking, not just in Italy, but across the globe.
Right. So I was going to say, you look at something like Alice, Sweet Alice.
Yeah.
And it's hard to the influence is coming with Argento's Phenomena with that film.
Yeah.
And I think they all take a little, so that was Alfred Soul on it. But I think a lot of these kind of American Giallos are obviously influenced by the early 70s films, but it can go either way as well.
Well,
I think
then you go back to
drama,
to the noir films, right?
But in the case of Alice, Sweet Alice, I interviewed Alfred Soul. I wrote a book on Alice, Sweet Alice.
I've got your book. Yeah, I've got it.
I interviewed him in depth, and he did not know those films. He was very much a fan of Nicholas Roeg. He loved Don't Look Now. So that kind of goes back to that whole thing,
right.
There's a movie that has sort of Giallo aspects to it. But you would look at that film and think, oh, well, he's obviously, he's paying homage to Mario Bava and Dario. No, he really wasn't. It just, sometimes these things are coincidental.
Happy accident type of thing. Yeah.
Because I think of The Girl Who Knew Too Much. It is, I guess, technically the first Giallo. Like, I know there's probably other ones that could be mentioned.
There were thrillers before it, but I think I would argue anyway, it's the first one that kind of brings that sort of lurid, tabloidy kind of quality to it that one would associate in terms of what we think of as Giallo. There was even a movie in the 30s called Giallo. I mean, there was Facts of a Murder by Pietro Germi, for example. There were other films, but the Bava film, which was a complete and total flop, by the way. It flopped in Italy. It flopped in the U.S. It was not a popular film. But it was the first kind of step in that direction. But that's a very lighthearted movie. So
and it
took a little while for it to get darker.
Well, there's two versions in there. The American version, I think, is unwatchable. The Girl Who Knew Too Much. The same with Black Sabbath, when they changed the actual kind of storyline in one of the segments and all that. But
the girl knew too much. To me, it feels like a noir. Like when
it's like a Hitchcock film, isn't it? In a way,
it's a sort of a spoof in a way, sort of love letter to Hitchcock, very tongue in cheek. But I mean, again, these things are seldom born fully fleshed. There's usually, it's the same thing with Italian Westerns. I mean, a lot of people don't seem to realize that there were a ton of Italian Westerns made before Sergio Leone made his first one. What we think of as the Italian Western is born with Fistful of Dollars. But there were a lot of imitative kind of Italian Westerns trying to look like, old-fashioned Hollywood Westerns and Western comedies and all kinds of other things that were very much part of the cinema landscape during that time as well.
Yeah, we've got like an upcoming show where we're going to be covering a few kind of Western Giallo hybrids.
Yeah, when we did the Klaus show, I watched And God Said to Cain, and that's I would say that's more like a gothic Western. I don't know, but it's a damn good one. I was trying to get Darren to watch it for a while now.
Westerns are not my thing, but I need to I do need to go on
There's
a
a
rabbit
lot
hole
going on.
and start watching.
I'll give you a suggestion. I think the most Giallo-esque Western made in Italy is probably Nest of Vipers or Night of the Serpent.
I'm writing that down.
With Luke Askew and Luigi Pistilli. I think that is and it was actually written by co-written by Enzo G. Capalli, who's obviously interested in this hybrid because he also directed. So Night of the Serpent or Nest of Vipers was directed by Giulio Petroni, who had already directed Death Rides a Horse and Te Pepa with Orson Welles and Thomas Millian. But Enzo G. Capaldi directed a film called The Death Dealer, Il Venditore di Morte, with Gianni Garco and Klaus Kinski, which is another very Giallo-esque Western. So there was obviously an intent there to sort of create something. But because these genres, obviously they overlap and they mutate, but at the end of the day, they reach a point in which directors do try to find new interpretive keys. Though it always ends up in comedy, which usually signifies the death of the whatever subgenre. Maybe Peplum ended up in comedy, and Westerns ended up in comedy, and then obviously there are films that go in a different direction. So you get sort of the swan songs that inevitably we associate to the death of the genre. In the case of Westerns, films like A Man Called Blade and Keoma in California, stuff like that. But it usually always ends up in comedy. And speaking of misinterpreting labels or overusing labels, crime films, a lot of films, they define Poliziotteschi, but actually you look at it's not true. Many are noirs. I would make the case that pretty much none of Fernando Di Leo's films really falls into the Poliziesco category. They're noirs, gangster movies, heist movies, films that, don't have that procedural police, investigative aspect at all. There are no policemen, no commissioners. Some are action films. They're just action films. Some are hybridized with gialli. So yeah, there is a tendency of overusing these labels.
Yeah, we're just starting to get into the Italian crime films. I'm loving them. Literally, you can see the hybrids as well with the Giallo crossover and all that. But yeah, I think I've seen 40 or 50 now, and there's not many that we didn't like, to be honest.
Yep. Well, I was going to ask this question, but I think it's already been answered, so I'm gonna just skip it. But it was how has Giallo influenced cinema as a whole? I mean, we kind of broke all that down. I would say.
I mean, I got one. So, what's your thoughts on recent years films that have been heavily influenced by the Giallo? And I will give you some examples, like Last Night in Soho, The Last Matinee, Frenzy in Venice. Is there any newer films that you like that kind of you can see a bit of a Giallo influence in? And you can start off with whoever,
I think the one that I like, although I didn't like it the first time around, was Barbarian Sound Studio.
Yeah.
We
covered that not too long ago.
That one I like. Most of them I don't like because they are too they're too self-conscious, and sometimes they take themselves way too seriously. They veer towards, I hate using this term because people use it too much, but pretentious. Okay. So most of them don't really do much for me.
Like what's that? The Color of Your Body's Tears or something?
It's not for me.
Yeah, I got you.
I kind of like the Neon Demon as well, but I know it's kind of divisive. Certain people do and don't. But yeah, Eugenio, have you got any kind of newish films that you can see the influence that you really like, the Giallo influence, or even just Italian genre?
Italian horror in general.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I'm not a fan. I'm not a big fan of throwbacks. Films that maybe
retro.
The grind. Let's do something reminiscent of the Grindhouse sort of category of films, or I don't know. I find them gimmicky and sort of stilted and too concentrated in looking at their own belly button than actually trying to conceive a story, an interesting narrative, and be about something other than film. this is the thing. I think we're reaching a point in which there are too many cinephile directors. I want to go back to a time in which directors loved the medium, but weren't cinephiles. You know, most of the films we grew up loving from the 40s and 50s and 60s were not necessarily directed by cinephiles. I can testify to the fact that not all of them, but a lot of the Italian genre directors, you know, they'd go to watch films. They were interested in that art form and in that medium, but they were not cinephiles. They were not reading about films. They were interested in the possibilities that cinema gave them as a narrative people, as a medium to tell a story, but they weren't necessarily interested in homages and, you know, so I kind of miss the strain of directors who lived, you know, who took from their own experiences and not through films, because what we're seeing now is a new version of a previous version, which was taken from another version of another. Like, it's just this domino effect of cinephiles ripping from other cinephiles, and I couldn't give two flying fucks. I want good stories that are tapped into the present. When I watch a film, I don't want to know, I know exactly what this person was watching as a kid. I want to be involved in an interesting story, the genre or otherwise, that makes me feel for the characters and the narrative.
Okay. What about Nathaniel? About yourself? Have you got any like neo giallos or just like?
Yeah, I've actually seen it in some surprising places lately. Well, I think the most recent one, actually, weirdly enough, was probably The Housemaid, which I didn't expect, but the Sydney Sweeney movie.
I want to see that, actually. Yeah,
I did watch that recently with my wife, just because I got to find something to agree with her.
Yeah.
On, you know. So.
It goes very Giallo-y in the second half, which was kind of a surprise.
Yeah, I figured it out, though. I predicted it. Like,
yeah. You can even if you know the twist, you can sort of figure it out. But the tone of it, like, there's a big tone shift halfway in. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like it definitely goes in that direction.
Well, the red herring in that film is just blatantly obvious.
Oh, incredibly obvious.
It's like, well, okay, well, no.
Yeah. So. Obviously, I mean, Maxine, of course, obviously is extremely Giallo influenced, although it has some major issues. Obviously. Yeah. I think my favorite, actually, of all the sort of Giallo influenced films lately would probably be Strange Darling, which is
I love that.
I did love that film.
Yeah, great film. I really underrated. I think it's still kind of neglected, but really and it's not overly throwbacky. It's not like a pastiche of past Giallo, but you can tell they've sort of absorbed it and kind of reinterpreted it, and visually, just the way that it takes sort of those ideas and turns them into this new, completely different kind of story. I really love that film a lot. So if that would probably be my number one.
It pulled the rug out for sure.
Several times.
I wasn't expecting that shit.
There's like Malignant as well. I don't know how you feel about that. It's got kind of Giallo. I wasn't a massive fan, to be honest. Yeah,
the one that people kept saying Giallo about, and I know Nathaniel and I don't know what Eugenio thinks, but we were underwhelmed by it, and I really don't see it that much, honestly, is Last Night in Soho.
Oh, see, I love that film.
I watched it.
I think it's because I'm from the UK and I like, London and all that. I've kind of been brought up with.
Mm-hmm.
But Dirk was the same one.
The first time I saw it, I watched it in the theater and I liked it. And then when I got home, I started processing everything, and I was like, I watched it again, and it went way down on that second watch. I was like, no, man, because some of it, there's a major plot holes that don't make sense. But it's visually it's got a lot going on, but it's
just got like a killer soundtrack though. If you were brought up in the UK and certainly in the 60s and 70s, like more so 60s, it's an amazing soundtrack. I think there's Giallo elements in there, but you don't hit you over the head with it. There's obviously slasher elements too as well, but yeah, it's weird because when that film came out, I thought a lot of you people, would love it. This would be an absolute 8, 9 out of 10, And again, it's divisive. I'm surprised by how many American people actually don't like it, but yeah, it's one of my favorites. Yeah.
It gets. I mean, the soundtrack and the look of it is great. It's just, yeah, the plot. There are just a few aspects in the plot that just drive me absolutely crazy.
There's some major plot
It's
holes.
so inconsistent.
Yeah.
But like by the end, I'm just like, what? Like there are some character things that just no. But I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't seen it.
No, it's almost a kind of obvious twist as well, if you
Yeah.
think about it. But yeah.
So, I guess we'll get on to, I would say, so what's your top 5 Italian genre films that must be seen? That must be seen in Italian.
In Italian.
Yeah.
Well,
Because,
poor
like, an
poor
example would
Eugenio.
be-
I mean, come on, he only watches them in Italian.
Well,
Yeah, I will only I've watched most of them in Italian.
okay.
I mean, I would make, and this might be a little controversial. I know there's some good dubs, English dubs, and there are films I would make the case that should be listened to in English. But generally speaking, because this is the whole thing. The scripts were written in Italian, then they were translated and adapted. So regardless of how, and anyway, they were shot in a lot of films were shot in multiple languages, so it's difficult to say what which is the language you should use, you should go with to watch these films. I would make the case that you should try to watch, especially if you like the film, you should try to watch it also in Italian. I'd make the case you should try to watch it also in Italian.
I think the first time I noticed, the first time I noticed though was Blade in the Dark. I was watching it in English and I had the subtitles on and they're translating it from the Italian and they didn't match. I mean, some of the things that are being said are just what, when he's talking about sunbaking in the sun like a frog, or I don't know what he's talking about. So I was like, that's why I meant, like, it's necessary. You have to watch it in Italian, certain films. But
I would make it also depends very much because and this kind of I think brings together a lot of things we've been talking about.
Yeah.
The greatest contributions of directors such as Dario Argento and Sergio Leone, I think it would be unkind to say that anybody who came after imitated. I disagree wholeheartedly with that. I think there are some great voices within the Western and Giallo genre that have nothing to do with either Leone or Argento. But their biggest contribution is that they basically told the industry with their films, you can do it the Italian way. You don't have to imitate. You don't have to use American templates. I think that was the greatest contribution. And so with the Westerns, you abandon, Native Americans and, a very, very John Ford-like or Howard Hawks-like themes. You get a whole variety of directors extracting narrative elements from what was happening in Italy. That's how you get the so-called revolutionary Westerns, which were, yes, set in Mexico, but they were actually talking about what was happening back home. So, and again, with the Giallo, Argento sort of said, you can make these films in Italy about Italians, which is not something that was happening before, because the idea was that Italians would not buy that these stories could be set in Italy and could involve Italians. Why am I talking about this in regards to dubbing? Because there were certain films that were conceived exclusively for the international market or mainly for the international market. Mm-hmm. When it comes to crime films, for example, they were made for both and arguably more for the Italian market and then for the international market. And films, there are certain gialli and certain, indeed, westerns, and especially crime films that are, they are unashamed in being as Italian as possible. And for a certain period of time, that was a winning thing. Like, people wanted Italian films. A lot of crime films were marketed around Europe as Italian. Even if they had Arthur Kennedy or whoever, Barry Sullivan or Marcel Busifi as the lead, they were marketed as Italian. So I would make the case that you have to kind of, and I know it's tricky, but you kind of have to see why this film was made and for what market. I would make the case that the more Italian the film is, the more you should watch it in Italian.
Okay. Yeah,
I think there's a lot to be said for that, and I think that the problem we run into is very often, and this kind of becomes sort of an elitist, snobby thing where they talk about the authentic track, and you're dealing with the misconception that the film was shot with an Italian soundtrack, a live Italian soundtrack, and that wasn't the case back in the day. So they're all manufactured in post. So it's not like watching a French film or a German film where indeed that would typically be the case. In this case, it's kind of a mongrel type thing. And the writing might, the main participants, Italian is their native language, and the dialogue may well be substantially better and substantially different compared to what's on the English tracks. But with the exception of really extreme cases like Black Sabbath and The Girl Who Knew Too Much, where they are literally transformed into completely different films. They're radically re-edited, rescored. It's just, they're literally like you're looking at two different films. When I think of movies from Italy that suffer from really bad English dubs, there are a few that come to mind. I would say the Stendhal syndrome is one that suffers badly in English.
Okay.
Black Sunday is another one. There are two English dubs, and I think they're both lousy. I much prefer the Italian track on that.
Okay.
Contraband by Lucio Fulci is one that suffers horribly in English. Blade in the Dark, which you mentioned, I can't tolerate that movie in English. I think Italian is the way to go. I don't know if I remember any others off the top of my head. I know Nathaniel will have some thoughts, but those are some that come to mind for me.
You didn't mention my number one, which I'm surprised.
Which one?
For me, the most extreme one would be Don't Torture a Duckling. I hate the English track with a passion. Like, I can't even listen to it.
Yeah.
It's so awful. I guess I'm a minority, but I have a weird affection for the English dub of Blade in the Dark. It just amuses me so much that I just
that's what I'm saying though. Also, it's like two different films.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, or something like Burial Ground, which is hysterically funny in English.
Oh, Burial Ground.
I mean, it's like so it's like you have to watch the English version at some point in your life because they're just so entertaining. I mean, they're not good.
Right.
Something like Kill Baby Kill, for example, I think is infinitely better in Italian than English by a long shot. But then you have it gets really strange because you can get a film like The Psychic, the Lucio Fulci film, where it was basically English is essentially the native language. Jennifer O'Neill and some of the actors, they used their real voices, they performed in English, but the Italian mix is so much better. There are actually like sound effects. There's just an attentiveness to the Italian mix of that film that's so much stronger. So it's kind of a tough call. Like, I think the atmosphere of the Italian track is far better. So I would say you need to see both versions. It's really
check them both. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, because you get say Dario Argento Sleepless, and you get both tracks. So you've got Max van Sydow on the one track, but then if you watch it in Italian, you don't, his character, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I switch back and forth on that one. Whenever Max von Sydow is on screen, I have to have his voice.
That's a good way of doing it. I've never thought that. Really,
he's one of the great voices in cinema history, so I have to hear his voice, but the rest of it is painful in English, so I switch back to Italian. I will mention one other one. It's not really bad as such, but it's an interesting example of a dub, an English dub that's done carelessly that kind of gives the game away, and that's The Whip in the Body.
Okay,
I think
yeah.
Whipping the
Yes,
Body
absolutely.
definitely works better in Italian, especially since too you don't get Christopher Lee's voice on either soundtrack, even though he spoke fluent Italian. His the film was primarily shot in English, but it really does spoil a big thing in that film.
Right. So that you kind of answered my next question anyway, because
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, what's the worst kind of English dubs? And I mean, the first thing most people would say is Haste by the Cemetery and Bob. But I don't, that doesn't bother me. You know, I actually like that English dub. I mean, his voice does not bother me like
It's
some
different
people.
in Italian, though. It's definitely different.
Oh, yeah, it is, yeah. But I don't know about you guys for time. Are you okay to do a little bit longer? You know, won't overstay our welcome too long.
I appreciate y'all doing this again.
Yeah,
I know y'all's time is valuable for sure.
And we wouldn't be offended if you wanted to stop you now. You know,
I'm okay with going on a little bit more.
Yeah, I can do a little bit longer.
Yeah. We will try not to keep you too long anyway, because we got like one subject left, I think, now anyway.
Okay.
So I don't know if Dirk wants to.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So, talking about the full life cycle of Italian genre films on home video. So why did it take so long to get the floodgates to open? Because I remember seeing it was called Buried Alive when I saw it back in 1987. I mean, the 1987. But I remember seeing that one first. It was the first Italian horror I ever saw.
Beyond the Darkness, yeah.
Yeah, Beyond the Darkness. Is what it would be, you know. But and then later on, I saw Cannibal Ferox, which I saw as Make Them Die Slowly. But I noticed it didn't flood the United States until and the UK, I guess, till much later. You know, I'm just curious why it took so long to get here. If y'all know,
a bunch of the films played in American cinemas. Very often they would be cut. They weren't necessarily ideal presentations, but a bunch of them did. You know, certainly the horror films, the crime films, for the reasons that Eugenio kind of outlined before, were a little bit of a harder sell because there was this kind of very snobby misconception about foreign cinema, and audiences were at least believed to be resistant to the idea of seeing films set in other cultures. So because these were openly Italian films, even though they did almost invariably had English dubs, there wasn't as much of a commercial viability for some of those films. Whereas, again, obviously Argento, up to a point, his films were getting major distribution in the U.S. and in some cases did extremely well. But in terms of home video, I mean, the early days, the VHS era, which Nathaniel kind of alluded to earlier, was, kind of the Wild West days of home video, when a lot of these things were showing up in really bad quality. They were, bad transfers. They were taken from bad prints, sometimes incomplete. Really shoddy looking, and I think the artistry was lost. So you had this kind of golden period at the end of the 90s into the early 2000s, where a lot of these films started to come out. But we're in another golden period now. We're getting a lot more stuff now.
If I could just add on a little, because I was sort of down in the trenches when it was happening, but there were three things that really changed the game. First of all, Japanese Laserdisc. Because those were the first ways that we could see a lot of these films uncut in English, like Tenebrae, The Beyond, House by the Cemetery, all that stuff. So either we were maniacs and plucking down $90 to $100 for these things, or we were getting them bootlegged at conventions or through mail order. So if you went to any horror or sci-fi, whatever convention in the U.S., like in the 90s, mid 90s onward, you were seeing these things were getting all over the place. So suddenly people realized, oh, maybe there's money in this, perhaps. The other thing is that all of a sudden, instead of being all rental focused, VHS switched over to sell through, and you had places like Suncoast Video opened up. And so that's when Anchor Bay jumped in on VHS, and they started putting out, Argento movies, Fulci movies, Martino movies, all this kind of stuff. People didn't want to rent these. They wanted to own them. They were like, I have to pay $20 to own it. Fine, I'll do it. And so they realized that there were these hardcore fans out there that had been, growing up watching these movies, and that there was money to be made on it. And then I think the Italian licensors kind of realized it too, and so that's why they're, all of a sudden, again, like I said, the floodgates opened up, and it's kind of been that way ever since.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, because I remember Four Flies on Grey Velvet was really hard to get hold of, and
Well, that was a
not
legal
that
problem.
long ago.
Yeah,
It
that
was
was all
weird
legal
because,
stuff.
oh yeah, it was weird because you had bootlegs where the picture quality looked good on a certain, reasonable on a certain bootleg, but then it looked fuzzy on another, and they, it kind of, you're always searching to try and see, what the best kind of version was. And then when that came out in the big set that they brought it out, man, I was like, oh man, one of the releases of the decade for me.
I used to get tapes. I used to get tapes from a place called Midnight Video, mail order bootleg place, and that's where I got a lot of these films for the first time. And Four Flies and Grey Velvet was taken from a really horrifically awful 16 millimeter print, which was full frame and slightly squeezed, and it was so dark in parts, like the scene in the park, you couldn't see what was going on. It was but you know what? This taps into something else I've talked about with people even just recently. Is I love the fact that this stuff is available. I think it's wonderful, but that discovery aspect and the rarity and the preciousness of it is gone. And I think we take things for granted now, because very often what people are obsessed with these days is slipcovers and cover art, and not to cut off my nose to spite the face, but worried more about the bonus stuff than they are about the film itself. And I think that it's great to have these things accessible, but back in the day, I don't think I ever worried about what kind of quality it was going to be in, as long as I could just see it.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's all about the film itself. I mean, not the package. I mean, the package is cool. That's just like the cherry on top. But but yeah, what was some of y'all's first Italian horror? Just curious that y'all.
We should ask Eugenio what his first American horror film was, just to give him an opportunity.
First of all, I should point out that in Italy, because it's easy to imagine that these films are well known. I'm talking about the Argentos and the Fulcis and and all the crime films and westerns and so on. These are all household titles and household names, and they're in pop culture. That's not the case at all. These films were made for the mainstream. I don't think people realize how some of these films were mainstream at the time. Italy has never had drive-ins, for example. Never had grindhouse. The concept of grindhouse doesn't exist in Europe. It's not just in Italy. They were grimy cinemas. There were even porn cinemas, but the whole concept of grindhouse and all that doesn't really. Even I would make the case, even exploitation as a term, we don't have an equivalent in Italian. So there were just genre films. Then there were low budget, big budget, bad, good, sleazy, whatever, but they were just genre films. And they were most of them are mainstream. Cannibal Ferox, there are photos of Cannibal Ferox's premiere in Italy. This was in a big Roman cinema where you could just go in, and there wasn't in a seedy alley, where with a guy flipping a coin in front of the theater. This was all very mainstream. Obviously, since then things have changed. I mean, there are exceptions. Obviously, Sergio Leone and Dario Argento would be big exceptions. Although I don't know if a 16-year-old, an average 16-year-old Italian is aware or is watching the films of these directors. And there are some films that have, longevity and are talked about. Cannibal Holocaust, of course, although more the title than people actually watching the film. Most people, if you say Cannibal Holocaust, still go, oh yeah, Yeah, isn't that the one where they kill people and, something like along those lines? They haven't actually seen the film. Yeah, a lot of these films were discovered or rediscovered by new generations over the past 20 years, 15 to 20 years. Obviously, there was a niche. There was, there were fans before then, going back to the 80s, and there were fanzines and all that. But it was very much in the background, in a corner. This was not a commonplace. In terms of my exposure to Italian gialli and horror, at the time I was very interested in expanding my horizons when it came to film. I remember there was a local video rental place, and you could rent as long as it wasn't a recent film, you could rent anything for 1,000 lira, which would be like less than €1 now. And at the time, there were lira, of course. And you could keep it. I mean, technically, you could have it. I think it was for 3 days, but they didn't give a shit. Like you could bring it back after 2 weeks. And I would just go there after school and just rent the hell out of that place. I would go out with a film by Lubitsch, Billy Wilder, and then a Fulci film, or some. I just rent everything, and I grew up obviously in Rome, but I had deep connections with London, so I passed a lot of time in London, and I had friends there, and I would stay there the summer, and which explains a lot of of my traumas. Who leaves Italy during the summer to go to London? But yeah, and I would watch. I remember in a video store in London, I got this film. It's a terrible film, but I didn't even know it was Italian. It was called Caged Women. And it had the cover was a random, like, it looked like a Penthouse VHS, it had nothing to do with the film. And it was a film by Leandro Lucchetti. It was a whip by Leandro Lucchetti. So I saw a lot of things randomly. And then, but I would take notes and I would buy fanzines and so I don't remember which the first one was. I do remember City of the Living Dead definitely being one of the first by Fulci. I still remember the VHS. I remember. I know one of the first was the Beast in Heat, the Nazi exploitation film.
Yeah.
Which is it's a terrible film. Absolutely god-awful film by Bazzella. And I remember seeing that and being very disappointed. I don't remember being shocked. I remember being really disappointed that it had nothing to do with this sort of gorilla man on the cover. Yeah. It's Salvatore Baccaro with some pubic hair stuck to him. It was very random. And then, then obviously when I kind of tapped into, okay, this is the same director. So I think Sergio Martino was one of the first directors that I started connecting the dots. I was maybe 12 or 13. And I think Martino's Gialli were definitely a big influence on me when it comes to Italian cinema.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, same question to Troy. I know Troy has been like a big Hammer fan, haven't you, since the early days?
Oh God, yeah. My mom was a horror film buff. She liked Hammer. She liked Vincent Price and the old Universal films, and indeed John Carpenter and stuff like that as well. So she did not like the Italian stuff. I tried, but she just could not get into it. But in my childhood, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, Vincent Price, Boris Karloff, these were like family to me. My childhood growing up in the 80s, obviously I'm in a small town in Pennsylvania. It's not a bustling metropolis. I don't have access to a lot of the things that people who live in bigger cities have access to.
Same.
But
Yeah.
we lived in a town that had a couple of good video stores. So I used to visit them quite frequently. And there was a lot of stuff that used to show up on TV back in the day that's, kind of surprising in hindsight. We mentioned The Devils earlier. That used to show up on the USA Network. It was cut to hell, but it used to show up on the US Network. So did Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, Andy Warhol's Dracula. Again, cut to hell, but they used to run on TV. The very first one that I saw, and I always remember this, is Baron Blood, the Mario Bava film with Joseph Cotten. Not really one of his better films, but a movie I like a lot. It's a fun movie. And I just remember being struck by that film, that it just felt different. It had a different feel, it had a different atmosphere, and I couldn't articulate this. I was very young, but I knew there was something different about it. And it wasn't the dubbing, because actually the dub on that film is really, really good. Down to the voice casting, like the movie's set in Austria, and they have, the actors are speaking with appropriate accents. So, I didn't know it was a foreign movie. I didn't even understand the concept of a foreign movie at that time, but it made a big impact on me. And they used to show things like Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave and Fulci's Black Cat and Lady Frankenstein. And there were a bunch that used to show up on TV. So that was my earliest exposure.
Nathaniel?
I think earlier I named the two that really kicked me off as a little kid, because I think it was probably almost back to back. But seeing Black Sabbath and Kiss of the Vampire right around the same time as a little kid was a game changer for me. I had no idea Black Sabbath was Italian, though. I just had Boris Karloff, so I was like, oh, there's something very different about this movie. And then I think when Blood and Black Lace hit VHS, I saw that and I really loved that one. But yeah, some of the early ones, I think probably not maybe like 12 or so. A friend and I managed to sneak out and rent Lucio Fulci's The Gates of Hell, and I still have a hard time calling it City of the Living Dead. But that one just went over like gangbusters, and of course then immediately ran out and got Zombie and House by the Cemetery, and those were great.
Chain reaction.
Yeah, those were great, like junior high party movies. Those are the best. That's the best time of your life to watch those, because they just go right into your cerebral cortex when you're a kid and just work like a charm. And Argento was harder for me to track down, because his at least where I grew up in Georgia, but it was really, I wanted to see his films because I read about them a lot, but they were possible to get. And finally, I managed to find a tape of Unsane, and then after that, I think Crystal Plumage. I had to buy one. I special ordered it through a video store because nobody rented it. And same with Inferno and Deep Red. So those took more effort. So I was a little later with him, even though I was just dying to see his films. But yeah, that's really what got me going. And I think Stage Fright was a pretty early one in high school too. That was like really, that just went over great. I'd show it to like every friend that I had, because it felt very slashery, and everybody loved Friday the 13th. I was like, well, you think that's something? Watch this movie. And you pop in Stage Fright, and yeah, just every single time people were like, wow. So yeah, those were the biggies for me early on.
The sixth egg for me is I watched, and I had no idea at the time, Demons, know?
Oh yeah.
And Pedro Bava's Demons. And I knew at such a young age that there was something weird about the dub. I knew it wasn't, lip syncing up, but I loved it. I just absolutely loved the film. And then I kind of went on, I saw like an eighth generation version of Cannibal Holocaust, and I actually thought that was real, when you see it like that, documentary style. But I mean, yeah, Dirk mentioned, his early one as well, Dead and Buried. But
Buried Alive or Beyond the Darkness.
Yeah. Oh yeah, not Dead and Buried, but yeah. So we've got a couple of fan questions that we've been saying. If you guys are okay to go the next, say, 10 minutes, and then we can kind of wrap up at the half hour each. Dirk, I know you've got a couple written down. Do you want to start off with the first? This comment smells of death sent one in.
Yeah, so he was asking about sensitivity / The House by the Edge of the Lake by Enzo Castellari. He's asking about that one. If why doesn't it have a release out, I guess.
In the case of Sensitività, and Castellari would argue it's not his. Sensitività is a bit of a controversial, sensitive topic for Castellari. He did indeed start the film, but he did not shoot all of it, and certainly did not follow the post-production of it. So it's one of those hybrid films within his filmography where, it's I don't know, it's a bit problematic to consider it one of his. Another one like that is Sinbad of the Seven Seas, where the footage is his, but then it was parts of it were shot or reshot by Cozzi, who turned it into something different, something Castellari hates with a vengeance. But Sensitività is one of those films that is available. There's no controversy tied to it. It's not tangled in any issues. It's up for grabs. So I want to go out on a limb and just say it's just a question of time. But for many of these films, it's just really a question of time. There's no big backstory to tell. It's just, sometimes it can be the price tag, because keep in mind that some of the companies that own these films are multinationals, like in the case of Mediaset, and selling the rights to home video labels is not their core business. They are producing or distributing big films. This is sort of nearly a side hustle to them. And as much as, they have quite a big price tag for these labels, and they do, objectively, it's crumbs for some of these labels. So for some of these companies, for the rights holders. So, and that also leads to another problem, which is the amount of time they take to respond. Sometimes it'll be 2 months, 3 months before getting an answer to an email, because, again, you are not their priority. But circling quickly back to, because I forgot a layer, which I think is worth mentioning. When it comes to my introduction to Italian genre cinema, of course, a bit of it comes from my family. Both my grandfather and mother worked in the business, so it would hence, because my grandfather Giulio Petroni was mostly active in westerns. My mother worked on, Troy mentioned, Flesh for Frankenstein and Blood for Dracula. She worked on those and a bunch of crime films and gialli and horror films, but my grandfather mostly westerns, so that was also part of it.
I found that I found that out on that recent, well, not recent now, that Cauldron release, Return of the Exorcist. Yeah, you did great on that, man.
Good. No, that we to go full circle. That is one I did the extras for that, and including a commentary with. Are we all three on that? I don't remember.
Me, I think
just us two. Okay, but I produced the audiovisual stuff for that 3 years prior to it being released.
Wow.
Dang. Yeah, crazy.
So I kind of cringe. I kind of cringe when I see the extras for that, because I think now we would do. They hold up. They're fine, but I would do things very differently. That's the problem when you wait so long. Is that you learn more. You have different collaborators. You're working with a different workflow, and it just feels dated to you. Although you're obviously making it a lot bigger than what it actually is. I don't think most people would probably notice even some of the things I do notice.
Right. Well, he had another one. He has several. I'm not going to name them all, but I guess I'll just pick I Am Afraid by Damiano Damiani. You know anything on that one?
I would love to see that get a release. I think that's I think it's a masterpiece, actually, with Volante. It's I mean, if it's not Damiani's best film, it's certainly one of his best. It's a great film. I don't know. I wonder if that is. Damiani's a strange one because, you know, Radius did put out a box set a while back of some of his crime films. He's not that type of genre director that the fans seem to really enjoy. He doesn't make the high octane, sort of politically incorrect, outrageous kind of over the top films. His movies are a little bit more introspective, a little bit more thoughtful and nuanced. So I don't know. I would say that it has enough name value attached to it that it would be a natural. So hopefully that will happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question. Are there going to be any more Brunello Rondi films planned? And the couple he mentioned are A Violent Life, Your Hands on My Body. Do you know anything about them?
I can answer for this one. I mean, I'd like to say yes. I think Rondi is an interesting director. It would be nice to see more of his stuff being released. But, you know, Brunello Rondi and Damiano Damiani, very different directors, interested in different things. But they do have in common and something which is the perception and the perception film critics have of them, and also their work objectively, sort of lives in that invisible line between pure genre and more authorial cinema. They kind of, with some exceptions, obviously in the case of Damiano Damiani, you have Amityville 2: The Possession, which is an American film completely. People tend to think it's Italian. It's 100% an American film.
My favorite of the franchise, for sure.
Yeah. Amityville 2, and in the case of Rondi, you have something like Riot in a Women's Prison, which we did a commentary for, me and Troy. But that is, again, those are exceptions. For the most part, the bulk of their work is sort of, you can't really market it as pure genre cinema, and it doesn't have those ingredients, a little bit like what Troy was saying in regards to Damiani, that has that ingredients that appeal to audience of genre and exploitation cinema. I mean, we could get into, which we won't, but for the next episode, we could get into a whole debate on what does being an author mean. Of course, I would make the case that some genre directors are indeed auteurs, but regardless, there are some directors that are very difficult to market. Their films sort of live in that invisible space.
Right.
Okay.
Kind of like Elio Petri, or would you say?
Yeah. Elio Petri. Yeah, I think that's a good example.
I think a big one that people are dying to know about is Inferno, the Inferno 4K.
I think Eugenio kind of already indicated the issue there, which is that it's owned by a massive company that simply just can't be bothered. You know, for them, it's peanuts. You know, any label that was able to make a deal to make that possible would make a killing. It would make a lot of money. But for Disney, Fox, it's nothing. You know, it's a drop in the bucket.
Okay, we can end on this question there, because I've had a question from one of my friends, Kenneth, and he wants to know if there's any more Lamberto Bava TV series, you know, on the horizon to come out. I don't know if you know anything, or I know you can't say on certain things.
I'll just say that you know, there's obviously been a geyser of interest when it comes to Lamberto Bava. I would make the case it never really, you know, there's always been an interest for Lamberto Bava. But over the past 2-3 years, I mean, Blade of the Dark was released by 2 major labels in 4K. Macabre now is getting a major release by 2 labels. We've had Brivido Giallo, really lavish box set from Cauldron. High Tension from Severin, Delirium, Photos of Joy, and 4K. I mean, there's been a wealth of his work being released. So, logic would suggest that why would that trend not continue?
Okay, good answer. Yeah, good answer.
I have one more question.
Bert.
I just wanted we could end on. Sorry, y'all.
No worries.
But I'm just curious. What is y'all's favorite genre of film? Period. Just curious.
Shall we do this the opposite way? Shall we start with Nathaniel and then?
Yeah.
I feel like poor Nathaniel is getting overwhelmed here. Let him pull forth.
God, I mean, I love them all, but some I obviously watch more of than others. But obviously, horror is kind of my first and truest love. But yeah, if you're talking subgenres, obviously, anything in Italian horror, Giallo, etc. But yeah, it's always going to be horror, I think, and thrillers, murder mysteries. Grew up watching Hitchcock, things like that. So yeah, anything that like, and the two blur a lot. So yeah, anything between those two, I think, is right up my alley.
Would Giallo be your top of the Italian stuff, or would it be Western?
Probably, although I'm also a massive crimi fan. I don't think those get nearly enough the love that they should.
Yeah,
I love krimis to death. I keep evangelizing for those. I'm glad that a little bit has finally started to trickle out this past year on Blu-ray, but it's barely scratched the surface. I mean, I think there's some just incredible films in there that outside of Germany most people have never seen, which is too bad. But yeah.
I mean, if you guys are up for it down the line, if we can do another one of these, then we can certainly bring up the krimi, and we can talk about them for a bit as well, because I want to get, really into them.
Yeah.
But yeah, carry on, guys.
Well, I mean, if David at Severin continues with the Christopher Lee Eurocrypt sets, which kind of running out of options at this point, but I mean, there's a Lamberto Bava project there that would fit, and there's certainly also another krimi that would fit as well. So that would be nice if that can be arranged. I suppose horror and horror adjacent has always been my favorite, although I don't really consider myself. I don't identify myself as like a horror fan in the way that a lot of people do. Horror fandom sometimes kind of surprises me in not always positive ways, because there is this kind of thing of I never hear this with regards to musicals or westerns or war movies or whatever. You've got to support the genre, and I'm like, why? Aren't you excited that a horror movie is up for Oscars? Not really. No. It doesn't make you do cartwheels. I'd rather on a case by case basis. So. Understanding that I'm not, in that camp, horror and horror adjacent mystery thriller, that sort of stuff has been my passion since I was a child.
Okay, Eugenio.
I don't really have a genre. I mean, I'd say the genres I grew up with the most are noirs. I'd say noirs were from Edward Dmytryk to Billy Wilder,
maybe Orson Welles, maybe.
Orson Welles. I mean, Touch of Evil for sure was a very formative film. I grew up very much watching because my mother didn't like television, didn't like me watching television. Both me and my sister. So she would. So I discovered all the sort of the sleazier stuff, in my early teens when I started being, more independent. But in my childhood, she experimented when around the time I was in primary school. It was the anniversary. I don't remember of his death or his birth of Charlie Chaplin, and she taped all his films. And there was a lot of skepticism about, would a kid would want to watch this stuff, and I did. I lapped it up. I loved it. I remember watching The Circus on a loop. I'd finish the film and I'd rewatch it over. The same goes for a number of the Marx Brothers. To this day is my comfort viewing. nothing makes me laugh as much as A Night of the Opera and A Day of the Races. They're films I love to death. So noirs, definitely. William Wyler, Mankiewicz, westerns. Howard Hawks was a major influence for me. Frankenheimer, Lumet. So I've always been tied more to certain, like discovering certain direct and certain era of films. To me, cinema was black and white for the first period of my life. Like real cinema was in black and white. And this wasn't a snobbish thing. Like it was just that what I was exposed to as a kid. And so it's a kind of what you get used to as a child, you know. So it was more indoctrination more than snobbery on my side. It was my mother's taste, but I loved it. So there isn't really a genre. I can think of films I love to death in any genre or subgenre. So yeah.
Okay. Awesome, man. This has been great, man.
Yeah.
This has been we've gone over a lot. I know that. But yeah.
I mean, I would love to do a part 2 at some point if you can. You know, it doesn't have to be anytime soon or anything. We can plan it out. But I just want to thank you guys. It's just so good to like sit back and listen to all of you talk and such knowledge and all that. I mean, it's a treat for the people watching. Sorry we couldn't get to like questions in the chat of what, you know, I didn't want to keep these guys like for 3 hours plus or what have you.
Right.
But yeah, we can do it all again one day. I hope, you know.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Anything y'all want to mention before we get out of here?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. All righty. Well, I guess we're going to get out of here, y'all. I appreciate everybody in the chat. Again, hope y'all understand. I'm sure you do. But we'll see y'all next week.
Have a good one, guys.
I'll tell you something. You're sick.